the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
He's going to snap out of it at some point and start knocking down some shots like Igor and Zakai have. I mean, it's just a month later in this conversation, and both those guys have been shooting it really well.
I mean, and you also just notice, I mean, this goes back to the Zakai thing and what the difference in the first half and the second half is. Like, Zakai just has to be active. Like, Zakai can't just float offensively. Zakai has to, because you and I, we've talked about like what we disagree a little bit on like what Zakai ultimately is as a 3-point shooter. But I think we both agree that regardless of what you think about his ceiling as a 3-point shooter is, he needs to take a lot of threes because that's his thing. Like either shots at the rim or threes. Like that is Zakai's bread and butter. And he doesn't take a lot of bad threes. He sometimes like late in the shot clock, he has to get some up. Like he takes a lot of open looks. He gets a lot of good looks at three, I think. Probably the best looks of anybody on Tennessee consistently have been in that 7-8 man unit right now. But you saw the difference for Tennessee on Saturday in the second half. Is like part of it was just Zakai was active. Like he kind of has to. I think he sometimes maybe just is so focused on getting other guys involved, like he was in that first half, that it's like you have to be more aggressive in getting shots up. Like Tennessee just kind of needs that from you, even if, especially based on what we've seen from Zakai from three. Like the variance has been in his favor of late that you just talked about. So I think Zakai, I mean, it didn't matter on Saturday because he picked it up and flipped the script in the second half against Vandy. But that is something that he just has to keep in mind, I think, throughout the course of a game, is that you have to get threes up. Like you just, part of what Tennessee is going to need, because Tennessee's defense is not always going to be locked down and be able to keep good shooting teams off the perimeter from making good shots. Like to counteract that, because Tennessee plays a lot of lineups where they have two non-shooters on the floor consistently, Zakai's got to shoot threes. Like I think he's just, the math ain't mathing there. So my thing is like, I think Zakai has to keep that in mind, is that he needs to take like 7-ish threes a game. And what maybe that all happens sometimes in the second half, like we saw on Saturday where he's getting a lot of shots up. But I just don't think there's a way around Tennessee being the best they can be without him getting a lot of shots up. And I think he is definitely an unselfish player and a pass first guy, but I think he also has to be cognizant of that a little bit. Like, man, I don't have any shots. Like I've got to get shots up here.
Yes and no to me. Yes, like first half, you're absolutely right. It felt like he was floating around. It was something that is very unusual. I wrote this in my post-game story. You didn't really notice Zakai out there.
Yes.
Like he was, and that's very rare for him. Even when he doesn't play well, that is usually when he doesn't play well, he's forcing the issue too much and he's turning the ball over.
He felt like a common Chaz SEC game in the first half.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I'd push back on the 3-point thing a little bit. The Kentucky game was the first game all season that Tennessee has lost when Zakai has had more assists than 3-pointers attempted. Typically, and it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. I think some of it is the nature of games where Zakai has to chuck up a lot of threes, is usually games when Tennessee's offense isn't flowing well. So that's why you kind of get to that. It's not as simple as him, like, oh, you don't want him to shoot him. It's sometimes he's forced to shoot bad ones because the offense is not clicking, and that's why you get to that number. But I don't feel like it's as simple as just him shooting a bunch of threes. Like that needs to happen. I do think he needs to be aggressive every game. He needs to be forcing the issue. These last two games, I've loved it. I mean, they're playing two of the worst rim defenses in the SEC, and I've loved the way that he's attacked the basket and tried to score at the rim. He scored 17 points, I think is what it was, at Kentucky on Tuesday night, and he took 2 3-pointers, didn't make either one of them. So it's a little bit different per game, I guess, is my point. And per lineup, like you're saying, I completely agree. When they got two non-shooters out there, yes, he needs to be more aggressive when they get an open shot, especially less than 15 seconds on the shot clock. He needs to take it. It's just cognizant of matchup, what other teams' rim defense looks like, who's on the court with them. So, yes, they need an aggressive Zakai. Completely agree. I don't think it's just as simple as shooting more threes, though.
Is there a sneaky stat you have from this game that you liked, Ryan Schumpert?
I think, if anything, it was just the turnovers. Like, everybody will talk about Tennessee's offense like when they're missing shots, and you have the first Kentucky game. Don't get me wrong, that was a tough watch when they missed a billion threes. But to me, it's just looks so much different when they're turning the ball over a lot. That's what they can't afford to do. They've had kind of off and on all season. Like when there's a turnover issue for a couple games, and then it feels like they get it under control and they've moved on, and then it rears its ugly head again. I think that's the big one for me. Just with the combination of limiting those miscues offensively and giving themselves, for a good offensive rebounding team, as many chances to get shots up and potentially rebound the ball. And then in some games, I thought you saw this a lot in the Kentucky game and in the first half of the Vanderbilt game, when they did have some more turnover problems early in that game. When they turn it over and it just turns into scramble drill, especially for teams like Vanderbilt and Kentucky, that have a lot of guys that can shoot the ball and shoot the ball on the court, and they get out in transition and get open shots. I think you see that be an issue for Tennessee. And when Tennessee gets their defense set and forces teams to play into half court, you usually take that bet more times than not.
Do you feel better or worse about Tennessee going into College Station this weekend after what you saw this past week?
I feel the same. I mean, it kind of goes back to what I said a minute ago. Like, this is the same type of week that we've seen a lot from Tennessee in SEC play. Close road loss, terrible first half at home, or below average to bad first half at home, and then a good second half, and they win the game. So
nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.